Hello and welcome to a Raw Chatter. This is your host, Vicky Midwood, and I am not solo today. I have an amazing, inspiring, wonderful lady with me. Angelic Ingram is a health practitioner. She is a wonderfully, marvelously trained coach who is just a star to work with, and she's an author. And she has got the most incredible story about how she actually got into the world of health and becoming a practitioner, because that wasn't what she always did. So I'm going to hand over to Angelique and let her tell you a little bit about her story, her background, what got her into health coaching, and why she decided to put it down in a book. So over to you, Angelique.
Thank you, Vicky. Thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to share a bit of my story with you and your listeners today. As you mentioned, I am a holistic health practitioner. I'm a mindfulness coach and now author, and I'm based in San Diego, California. And my journey through to becoming a holistic health practitioner and into mindfulness practice began for me when I was married to my first husband, and we had just gotten married. There was a tragic event that occurred on his side of the family, and I believe that that triggered me to start a whole new journey on my own through autoimmune disease. And this is what I share in this book and with my audience and my community is how to overcome these kinds of challenges, how hard it is, how difficult it is to overcome trauma and really just dive into yourself and to the person that you want to be, um, by paying more attention to yourself and to your body. And it's a powerful thing, mindfulness practice. And I'm just again really excited to be here and share a little bit more of the details with you today. So thank you again for having me.
We'd love to kind of dive in a little bit more, because what you said at the beginning there was that there was a family trauma incident tragedy that you believe kicked something off. And let's just dive into that a little bit more. So for people who don't understand trauma,
Mhm.
um, this is something that perhaps we need to get some clarity on, because there's a lot of practitioners and there's a lot of posts and stuff that talk about big T trauma and little T trauma, and it's just in my head, trauma is trauma. If it affects you physiologically, physically, mentally, emotionally, and it has a profound effect and you can remember it, then it's trauma, isn't it? And so for you, what was that particular thing you think that kicked off your issues? Was what Explain to us what happened.
Right. Well, before that happened, let me just say as well that, I was 30 years old. Up until that point, I was physically well. I was always getting checkups, my physicals, no other underlying conditions. And then I got married, and then a year after our wedding, his parents separated,
Right.
and my in-laws separated. And I don't want to go too much into this tragedy, but let's just say there was a shooting, and my mother-in-law was shot in the head. Um,
Gosh.
yes, and so that I believe was the trigger and the catalyst to my physical condition that came about a year and a half later.
Wow. So that's interesting. So it didn't come on immediately. It wasn't a kind of immediate thing, and you could connect the two events together. It took a little bit of time, didn't it? So how were you able to kind of connect that with what happened to you? Because to anybody listening, it's kind of go, well, hang on, if that happened a year and a half, you know, before she started with feeling really not well and all of the symptoms, like kind of how do you know it was that? So help them and us to understand a little bit more about what that powerful connection actually is?
Sure. I wasn't aware of that connection either until I finally was connected with a rheumatologist, when my symptoms started to becoming more and more, affecting me, because by the time I was diagnosed with my condition, I was already in a wheelchair. And
Whoa.
so the rheumatologist, trying to figure out what was going on with me in the beginning of before my diagnosis, said, what's been going on? What has been transpiring in your life? Talk to me. And I told him, of course, about what had happened with my in-laws.
Yeah.
And he said, all of us, we all carry viruses. We all carry cancer cells and such. And when trauma affects our lives, when stress affects our lives,
Yeah.
it can trigger these viruses. It can trigger these cells to, come about. And now here you are, in front of me, a 32-year-old woman who's never had any physical issues before, with this tragic event tailing behind her. And yes, that's definitely, um, what he's like, what I feel
Mhm.
is causing what has happened, what is happening to your body now.
Wow, amazing. And that's a long time for you to wait to get a proper diagnosis and to see somebody. When you did finally have that conversation, did you have a sense of relief that actually there was a kind of tangible reason and maybe you could move on and do something perhaps a little bit more that you'd not done before? Did it give you hope?
It did, yeah. And just to go back on what you said, just in the beginning, 4 months was actually really quick
Right.
to get
Okay.
diagnosed, because there are so many people with myositis, which what I was diagnosed with, more specifically dermatomyositis. Um, People wait years to get this kind of diagnosis because it can be very hard, to do that. So I was very lucky that it only took me 4 months to get my diagnosis. And once I knew what it was, although I never heard of it before in my life, I didn't even know how to spell it. I'm
Right.
just thinking, what is this? Am I going to live? Am I going
Right.
to be treated? And this was
That's
the
the
hardest
thing.
part.
Just let me ask you there because I hadn't heard of it until I read it in the chapter in the book. And obviously, I'm guessing that 99% of our listeners won't have heard it either because it is a rare form, isn't it?
It is.
So for those people who are eager, I will put the name of it in the notes so you can actually read it. But do you want to just say it one more time and then explain to people just how that shows up in you?
Absolutely. Again, it's called dermatomyositis, and it is a rare autoimmune condition, inflammatory disease that affects muscles and, in my case, the skin as well.
Wow.
So it gradually came about over the last year and a half prior, right after the
Yeah.
trauma occurred, and my muscles started becoming weaker and weaker. My shortness of breath was getting stronger. I wasn't able to really, um, do a lot, and then it came to the point where I couldn't lift my arms. I couldn't roll over in bed by myself. I couldn't get out of bed by myself.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a gradual thing, but it seemed to me at the time like it hit me like a wall. And it
Brilliant.
wasn't until one morning I went to get up and get dressed to go to work, I couldn't do it. And I had to call in. That was my last day. And I went on disability at that point. But
So just in that moment when because I myself have been in a similar situation where I thought I was paralyzed. I couldn't actually move. And that just explain for people listening what that feels like and the cascade of thoughts that
uh,
go through your head in that moment when you realize that your body's not doing what you think you're telling it to do.
yes, the night before I had called in, unable to get dressed, I was at work, and I just knew something was wrong with my body. In the beginning, I thought, well, maybe I'm just out of shape because I hadn't been working out. I hadn't been going on my walks. I was a very avid power walker. And I'm like, why am I feeling short of breath? Why can't I walk more than 2 blocks without getting out of breath? And so my husband as well thought, well, maybe you're just out of shape. Maybe you just need to like work into it. And so I thought, okay, great. I'll just start doing that. But the more and more I tried to move and exercise, the worse my symptoms started to become more apparent, and panic started to come and hit me. And I knew my body. I knew at the night before, I wasn't able to get dressed in the morning by myself, that there was something more going on with my body. There was something more traumatic going on with my body. And while at work, I was trying to hand some paperwork to a parent over the counter because I worked at a pediatrics office at the time.
Right.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't reach her. And she looked at me and she said, "Are you all right?" I said, I don't think so. I can't reach you. So she came over the counter and met me to grab the paperwork. And I tried to keep it together. I tried to keep it together, but I felt like, okay, this is very serious. And I tried to get myself through the rest of the night at work, and I was picking up some books that the kids had left in the waiting room. And I was picking them up to put them back on the bookshelf, and I went to push myself back up, and I couldn't do it.
Oh my goodness. Well, so when you realized that you were almost kind of stuck, what was going through your head? Or was there any discomfort? Was there any pain? Or was this, what can you kind of help us to understand what on earth that must have felt like?
Oh gosh, it was horrible, Vicky. It's, the panic.
Right.
I felt my heart just pounding. Like I was afraid. I was so scared that there I was by myself, not able to get myself up.
Wow.
And it all seemed like it happened so quickly, though. I started to panic. My heart was palpitating. Um, I was trying to keep it together. A nurse was walking by, a friend of mine, and she saw me and she came running over to help me up,
Right.
and she just sent me home. And so when I was walking through the parking lot to get to my car, that's when I felt the pain kind of settling in.
And
And
where did you feel the pain? What was it? Where was it hitting you immediately?
it all over. It was
Oh,
from head
really?
to toe. And when
Wow.
I got into my car, which I barely did, and I started to look back as I reversed my car, that's when the pain just kind of radiated throughout my body, and to turn
Wow.
my neck was just so painful. And I just prayed to God that please just get me home, get me
Right.
safely home. And
So,
just to hold on to the steering wheel was so painful, and I started to cry. I
wow.
was an emotional wreck because I didn't know what was happening to me.
So actually, that because as you are aware, but our listeners might not be, one of the most powerful stress releases is to cry, is
Yes.
is to is to let it out, and this is where you sort of recognise that the body is flipping incredible. Whatever was going on, it kind of knew that it needed to help you to release something somehow, and so having these like complete floods of tears must have in a way kind of felt relieving. But how far did you have to drive? How long did you have to endure this until you got to your home?
It was about a 15-minute drive. And by the time I got home, I parked the car, and I literally had to lift my legs out of the car, and my husband saw me through the window and came running out to help me. And I just wanted to fall to the ground. I just wanted to like wish this thing away, whatever was happening. And I was still kind of like in a denial as well, because I did think, okay, maybe I just need the rest, you know,
I think
even
that's
though,
the normal human response though, isn't it?
right.
Because we don't want to go to it being really horrible. Because I think logically you could think, oh, maybe it's a virus, or maybe I've got muscular sclerosis, but no, it can't be that because that comes on more slowly. Or, and then your kind of brain comes up with a blank. And so we just kind of go, nah, I just need to rest, just need to sleep.
Yes, right. I'm gonna sleep this off. Tomorrow morning, I'll be good as new, right? And then that wasn't the case, obviously. I had to call in because I couldn't get myself dressed.
Wow.
And that was difficult. And from that point on, my symptoms were getting worse and worse, and I ended up confined to the wheelchair by the time I was able to see the rheumatologist and get a diagnosis.
So you're in America, which is slightly different to the UK. So in that scenario, the first thing that we would do in the UK would maybe go to accident and emergency, or try and get in to see our general practitioner. So what did you do? What was kind of like, oh my God, you couldn't get dressed in the morning, you had to call in sick. What did you do in terms of trying to get some kind of help straight away, or didn't you?
I did, absolutely. The next day, when I wasn't able to get dressed, my husband put me in the car and we went off to the urgent care center.
Right,
They didn't quite know what was going on. They took lots of blood tests. They thought it was lupus because I did have the rash on my face. I started
right,
to come up with these rashes as well on my face and around my joints, my fingers and my toes and knees and such.
right.
Um, and they couldn't quite figure it out. Again, like you said, they thought it was MS as well, but
Yeah.
that was ruled out as well as lupus. Um, and so, yeah, I went to the urgent care. They referred me to see my primary care doctor, which I did, and I had never met her because there was really she was
You
brand
were
new.
healthy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And there I was a bit, and I think a lot of people with chronic illness might experience this with doctors as being shunned,
Right.
being kind of like, okay, there's nothing going on, kind of in your head thing, or, maybe it's just, whatever. They just kind of shun you off. And I
I
didn't, I
think a
kind
lot
of,
of women will be nodding away going, "Yep, yep,
yeah,
we know that."
yeah.
Yeah,
And it's unbelievable because, here I was in a wheelchair, unable to like look up at her to even just look at her. And, she was trying to rush us out of the office and handing my husband literature on, all the possibilities of what it could be. It was just, we
wow,
couldn't believe it. And my husband said, no, look at my wife. She is unable to move.
yeah.
She can't do anything for herself. We're paying you to help us, and you need to help us find the answers. And so it took a few
Can I
battles.
just backtrack from that for a
Of
second?
course.
So how long was it before you got to see that primary care doctor? Because to be in a wheelchair and just to be able to get hold of a wheelchair and to recognize that you needed to be in a wheelchair, there must have been a bit of a time lapse.
There was, yeah, there was. There was a few weeks actually from the urgent care appointment to see the primary care.
Right.
Urgent care, we got a referral for a wheelchair to help assist me. Um, and so, of course, I had insurance then, so that was a good thing.
Right.
Um,
And
and
all
so
the while, are your symptoms getting worse?
yes, they are.
Wowzers.
Yes, and then I started to suffer with dysphagia, which is the difficulty of swallowing.
Oh
So
my
this
goodness.
this came after, I started seeing my primary care doctor. It started to come up, maybe a few weeks after I started to see her on a regular basis. So then I had to give up food. I had to drink my meals 3 times a day, protein shakes, which was horrible.
Yeah.
But, I needed to stay nourished, of course. So,
So on that kind of note, did you kind of think, were you scared to actually take the shakes down? Because if you can't swallow stuff, then we can almost get a fear of ARFID. So which comes on where people are frightened or traumatized because they're scared that they're going to be sick, or it's going to come up, or they're just not, they can't actually swallow it and get it down. Was there any fear around that, and your muscles not getting the nutrients? I mean, what were your thought process when you realized you couldn't swallow and you're going to have to live on protein shakes?
yeah, there wasn't looking back, there wasn't a whole lot of fear around that, around, worried about not being able to swallow because I was able to take the shakes down okay.
Cool.
Um, I think that the fear was more about, am I gonna live through this?
Wow. Right. That's
Am
that's
I am I
massive, isn't it?
yeah, am I gonna get through this, or is this my life? Is this my life from now on? And before the diagnosis, of course, that's the hardest part, is going through these feelings, not being able to move, not knowing what it is. Is this going to take my life? Is this going? And so, yeah, depression started to set in.
Right.
Yeah.
And for you, were you trying to get your body to move? Were you starting to try to see if you could get your mind to work over the muscles, or were you just so kind of confused, defeated, depressed, unsure that you were just like, I don't know what's going on?
I was more frustrated because I couldn't move. I wanted to move. I wanted to be able to, move my body and try and help myself regain the strength that I was losing, but I couldn't do it.
So
And
can I ask, like, really personal stuff now? Well, it's not personal, really,
yeah,
it's
of
stuff we all
course.
do, but my brain's going to things like, if you want to brush your hair, or if you want to brush your teeth, or you need to go to the bathroom, you couldn't do any of those?
No, I couldn't. My husband stayed home with me the first month. Then, of course, the bills were still coming in, so he had to get back to work. And so we had to hire home nurse because of those reasons. I could not do anything, and I needed full-time care of doing all of these things.
How
And
did that make you feel, Angelique, when you
oh my
couldn't
gosh,
do the most mundane of things that most of us, we just take for granted?
completely defeated. I was just beside myself. I felt like a burden. I did not want to. I did not even want to like have my protein shakes. It
Right.
was very
So that's kind of what I'm getting to. It was there any point where you just kind of thought, what's the point? People would be better off without me. I would be better off without living
well,
like this. Is there any time that you went that deep, or did you find not manage to go that low?
no, I managed not to go down that road. Thank goodness. But I could definitely see why I would have, because it was so difficult and so hard. But I had a great circle of friends that helped me. The doctors that I worked for at the time, I was working, as I mentioned earlier, with the pediatrics office, and I worked for 7 doctors there, and they would allow the nurses to take, um, you know, um, options to come over and help me at the house. And that was it was such a blessing, it was such a blessing that I had people like that behind me because it was hard. I didn't have the support of a lot of my family members.
Right.
My parents did come, of course, and
But I
it's
guess for them, seeing you like that, they probably weren't quite sure what to say, or what to do.
no,
Yeah.
no, because this was all new to them too. They've never had seen anything like this, and it was hard for them to understand
Yeah.
because I looked okay on the outside, and I'm sure
Right.
a lot of other people, like your listeners, who suffer with chronic illness, those invisible diseases, that, "Oh, okay, you look okay.
Yeah.
What's wrong? Why aren't you, able to do this or do that?" And it's very hard to wrap your head around, much less trying to make other people understand what you're feeling because it's indescribable.
Yeah. And I think you put that so well. You almost, you get a sense that people think that maybe you're just faking it, or you want attention.
Yeah,
And that couldn't be further from the truth, especially the amount of pain that this actually caused for you. So once you'd got your diagnosis and you kind of knew what the heck was was wrong, is that when you decided that, you know what, I'm going to try and sort myself out and look at the whole holistic picture?
absolutely. Oh my gosh, Vicky, I did like a 360 because I was actually on the PA waiting list program, the PA physician assistant program waiting list here in California to one of the schools, and because I love science, and
Right.
it wasn't until all of this happened that I started to see more and more of the bureaucracy behind these HMOs here in the States and the
Oh yeah.
healthcare, and I'm like, okay, even though I was going through what I was going through, I'm still observing what's going on around me because I was in
Right.
and out of the hospitals all the time with the side effects of these treatments that they were giving me.
Right.
And
So
yeah,
can I just put in there? So I'm guessing that the first port of call was medication, and no doubt it was medication after medication after medication.
well, they started me on the first protocol of treatment for these kinds of issues, and which is methotrexate. It's a small form of chemotherapy.
Yeah.
And then the prednisone, of course, the steroids, the crazy
Mm.
steroids that many of us just love-hate relationship with. But
Yeah.
yeah, and it took a long time for that to kick in.
Right.
So in the meantime, again, I was in and out of the hospitals with the vomiting, the stomach cramps, all of the crazy side effects that come from these treatments. But I stuck with that treatment and I started to respond to it. And from that point on, I was able to get out of the wheelchair and start to work through physical therapy, rehabilitate myself.
Amazing.
And eventually I acquired full remission. And
So what sort of time frame are we talking? Because to be able to put up with them symptoms just on its own is pretty darned exhausting.
yes.
And then to go through, right, I need to try and push myself now and get moving and do the physio. And I'm sure that there were some days where you didn't want to do it.
Uh, I
Right.
had no idea. My husband had to drag me out of the house.
Right. So I mean, the whole kind of journey and the whole process, how long are we talking about from you finally finding out what the heck's wrong with you to you now feeling that you are recovered?
It's just over 2 years. Just over
Wow.
2 years. And it took me 2 years actually to get through physical therapy. So I
Right.
should say probably 3 years. So yeah, a long journey. I know so many are still battling their myositis, and I'm just very blessed. I considered myself I'm just so grateful that I was able to do that. And I was just truly feel like I was given a second chance at living a somewhat normal life again, so I've been in full remission for 20 years and up until recently. So I'm just grateful for that as well.
So, and this is something that I think is important because you that was a catalyst, that whole incredible experience that is equally horrific but also amazing because we recognize that the body, with some help, is designed to heal itself, and
Yes.
it allowed you to learn to become a mindfulness coach and a holistic practitioner. So in that role now, how do you feel when you are sharing some of what's happened to you with your clients, and what would you like our readers to take away from you, our readers, our listeners? So I've got books on the brain. I know you share your whole story in the book, especially the key points, but what is your overriding message to them when they come and see you, and maybe they've been down the road that you did, and they've been to the general care practitioner and been shunned and feel that there's no hope? What would you like to say to people?
I want to let people know and feel safe that, what they're feeling, what they're going through is very real. It's very real. Yet we have the power within us to get through these conditions, these issues, the events, the experiences that we're having, that we all, go through in life. And knowing that you have that power in you to just create a little bit more peace, some patience, some compassion for yourself, things that I didn't have really going through my experience, but I knew that they were there. I knew that because there's a whole other story behind all of this. I was a person stuck in a lot of things like judgment and blame and guilt. I struggled with so many things.
Right.
And going through this experience 20 years ago, and coming out of it, getting my license as a holistic health practitioner and immersing myself in a life of mindfulness, becoming more aware of how I think and what I am responsible for, what I have control of in my life. Now that I'm 20 years later, I'm relapsing, and I've been diagnosed with two more other autoimmune conditions since last September. I have more peace around it. I know that I can get through it. And I am heading again towards remission once again. And I'm just so grateful that I have the resources and the tools now
Yeah.
through my mindfulness practice to get through this like once again and thrive and be successful, be happy, and have some balance in my life. And that's what I want for my clients. And when people come to see me, we have those conversations, and I know that you as well, have that power. You've gone through your experiences, and we all can keep thriving, with the support of each other.
And I think, that is such a beautiful message, because we can get through it. But the important things, I think, that your journey helped you to recognize, and it wasn't the same for me on my journey. I was very, very much on my own, and I had to learn to trust people who I'd never met before. But that was part of my journey. But for you, you had people who were able to come and visit you, and who were able to talk to you about stuff other than what you were going through. They were able to tell you about what was going on, in your old job and what have you. And the importance of creating friendships, and the importance of communicating and being able to talk about stuff is so valuable. Recognizing who we are as people. You said that you had some issues, that you were really judgmental. Well, hello.
Right.
Welcome to my world. Yeah. And social media kind of encourages that to some
Yeah.
extent, because when we're looking at people's bodies, or people's achievements, or what they're wearing, or even how they decorate their clothes, or the color of the car that they choose.
Right.
we
It's that comparison
Right,
problem.
we judge, and we
Sure.
don't stop and think, well, where am I even getting my opinions from? And usually they're from our beliefs, and oftentimes they're not even ours, because we heard our parents saying it, or we heard a teacher saying it, and we thought that
Absolutely.
it was a. But when you have the opportunity, and it sounds weird, but when you have the opportunity of such adversity and an illness that kind of forces you to kind of stop
Hmm.
and take a proper deep look at yourself, warts and all.
Hmm. And
And
that's
you
not
can,
easy. That is
yeah,
not easy to
and it's
do.
not, and it's not. But allowing yourself to actually to do that, and taking away the judgment and just replacing it with curiosity,
Yes.
and allowing yourself to just kind of go, oh, okay, all right, so I found that out. But also, I think you said something really important there that I just want to pick up on, is that particularly with autoimmune issues, for people who don't necessarily understand what they are, we never kind of are cured from them. And I think, particularly in the UK, and I don't know if it's the same in the US, we've have this idea that you go and you get a fix and you get a cure, and that's it, done.
Right.
And as you and I know, the body doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work that.
And we have to look at the underlying cause, which is what you really do help people to do. And as a
Mm.
holistic practitioner, we look at everything, that our beliefs and our language and our habit patterns and our lifestyle and all of that kind of stuff. And the thing with autoimmune issues, as you said, is they go into remission, and yours was in remission for 20 years, which is incredible. But unfortunately, and this is just for the listeners, just kind of to know, is that oftentimes when you have one autoimmune issue, as time goes on, you end up getting more.
Right.
And that's just kind of the way that our immune system works and the way that our body works. But if you do have the tools, or you can work with someone like Angelique or myself who understands how you can help to manage those issues, then they can not really cause you any day-to-day issues at all, and you can just get on with your life. um,
Absolutely.
and so this is what I kind of want people to know. And if anybody has gone through such a frightening experience, or is going through one right now, or knows somebody who is going through it, and they're kind of like, what is wrong with me? And the other person, whether it's your friend or a family member, going, how can I help them? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I have a website, which is mindfuljourneytofreedom.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Angelic Ingram, and I'm also all over Instagram, always sharing experiences and reaching out, connecting with people. I'm always happy to connect with people and share experiences, share our stories, support each other. There's no obligation. I absolutely just love to connect with others and create a community because, that's so important when we're going through such adversities, is creating the circle of people who truly get it, who truly understand without bias, that can be there to support us and help us find more peace and some more balance in our lives as we move through the challenges that we go through.
Incredible. So there you go, people. That's how you get in touch with Angelique. And I will put all of those links and details, obviously, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, they'll be in the kind of description. And also, you can read for yourself Angelique's chapter in Women Thrive, inspiring stories of women who have overcome adversity. And there is also a link for you to get a copy of that book, either a hard copy or a Kindle version. And I would like to say thank you so much for being so open and so honest about how this affected you and how at times it made you feel,
Yeah.
but also for showing the people who are watching on YouTube just how well and how healthy and how vibrant you are now. Even though you have got some issues, you still are just radiating that that energy of somebody who is comfortable and at peace with where they're at. And that's available to everybody. And thank you for sharing it.
Absolutely. Vicky, thank you for having me and opening up the space for me to share my story. I so appreciate it. And thank you to the listeners out there. And I hope you all thrive well through this crazy life of ours.
That's a great message to end on. And so that is it from me for another week. Don't forget, folks, the podcast comes out at 6 a.m. every Tuesday morning. So tune in to the next one next week. Bye for now.